I have been happily married to my wife, Clara, for about 3 years now. I love this woman to pieces. I don't want to get sentimental, but she truly is my other half, and I cannot see myself with another woman, even now. Before we got married, I made my stance on children clear, that I didn't want to have any. She agreed at the time, and I thought that was that. About a year and a half into our marriage, she brought up the question of children again. I again said that I didn't want to have any. She hummed, and we went back to what we were doing before. It wasn't so much a conversation, but more so an odd question this time around, and I didn't think anything of it. We had a very robust bedroom life but always took the necessary precautions. She has the implant, and I use a condom about 90% of the time, so I wasn't worried. Her bookshelf recently broke, so I ordered a new one. I wanted to build it as a surprise and put her books up on it for when she came home. While going through them, I noticed an old journal of hers. I immediately smiled and flipped through it. When we were in college, she'd always carry it around. It was a future planning notebook of sorts. If she wanted something in life, she'd draw out exactly what she envisioned, add clippings, the whole 9 yards. It was a type of manifestation, if you will. She had shown it to me in college after declaring that she wanted to pursue her doctorate, and I remember being stunned at the attention to detail. I mean, we were only sophomores, and she knew exactly what she wanted to do, what she wanted to study, and where she would take herself. It made me feel out of my depth, and I liked it. Anyway, I flipped through the journal, reminiscing about the past. I hadn't expected there to be any new entries, at least not anything recent that I hadn't experienced with her. But as I opened it up, I saw something I never thought I'd see. It was a section dedicated to pregnancy and baby prep. She had researched prenatal vitamins, gyms in our area, and had images of cradles, etc. It was only 2 pages, but I remember feeling so sick. In my head, there was only one reason she'd put that in a journal like this: she wanted kids. Naturally, I was torn up. I kept telling myself I had been upfront about what I wanted, and if she hadn't, that was her fault. But the thought that she'd secretly been suffering because of me, that she was holding herself back from the life she wanted to please me, I couldn't stand it. I confronted her about it as soon as we came home, and I found out the situation was a lot worse than I thought. Clara did indeed want kids, but claimed she wanted our relationship more and was okay with compromise. I asked her a million times if she was sure. I really wanted her to be honest and not feel like she had to hold anything back. She insisted that not having children wasn't a deal breaker for her, but I kept pushing. I couldn't understand why she'd put something that wasn't that important to her in that journal. In the midst of our conversation, she dropped the nuke. She told me she had gotten pregnant a year and a half ago but terminated it, offering up the information like I should have been relieved, like it was the proof she needed to convince me that she meant what she had said about children not being a deal breaker. I can't describe what I felt in that moment, or what I'm still feeling. What I can say is that I have never blown up at my wife the way I did that night. I didn't put my hands on her, I would never do that, but it was not a pretty exchange. I just remember feeling hurt that she hadn't consulted me on such an important decision, that she went and had such a life-altering procedure without discussing it with me, and that I didn't even notice it happened. I mean, those things have side effects, right? She would have been bedridden for days afterward, in physical and emotional pain. How could I not have seen the signs? I'm still beating myself up about it. I remember her asking me if I wanted kids, but nothing about her emotional state for the rest of that week when she would have had the procedure done. How much can I really claim to care about her? I don't want children, I still don't. But I'd rather chew my left arm off than make her have a termination, especially now that she's told me she isn't really against having kids the way I am. I'd happily raise a child if it meant she didn't need to go through something so drastic. I've been staying with my sister for the last week and a half. I needed space to think, so I left. I want to see her, to ask if she's okay, but I don't know what to do or say. I'm still unbelievably angry at her and at myself. I don't want to yell at her again. I think the first time scared her pretty badly, and I don't want to repeat that. My sister thinks I'm being petty, punishing my wife for something I would have agreed with regardless. But I wouldn't have agreed. I don't know. Am I the jerk? Update 1. Before I get into where Clara and I are now, many of you had some misconceptions regarding me reading Clara's journal and other matters, so I wanted to clear that up first. You're wrong for snooping through her journal. Many of you said something along these lines. I met her when I was 6 years old, and we had experienced over half of what she had written in that notebook together. She has been letting me read her entries routinely since college, although I read them more often back then. As I said, I found her decisiveness incredibly attractive. However, college was 6 to 7 years ago, and times change. I'm not sure if she has other journals, but her use of this specific one decreased as we got older, and so did my reading. I felt no qualms about picking it up and reading it that day because I never have. This was not the first time I read that journal without her present, as I've been given express permission to do so. It was meant to be a quick trip down memory lane. I had no idea she had added more entries, let alone pregnancy planning. She keeps all her old journals, sketchbooks, and other items in the same area, and this book was in that pile. You're a monster for leaving her for a week and a half. To be clear, this was a mutually respected decision. I told her I needed space to think, and she suggested I take it outside the house. Granted, she wasn't the happiest when she said it, but we had just finished a heated argument. We texted the entire time I was at my sister's place. It was mostly dull and mundane conversation, pleasantries, but I didn't just abandon her. We weren't speaking audibly, but we weren't no contact. Things were just tense and very different from our usual level of interaction. Everything was surface level. We would check to make sure the other ate, showered, and so on, but that was it. There was no continuation of our discussion while we were apart. We were both taking the time to ensure we were in the right headspace to have a proper conversation, as is common for our relationship. It just took me a bit longer to get there. Asking you if you wanted kids was enough to make the decision. She doesn't owe you anything. Reading through the comments, many of you thought this, and we're simply going to have to disagree. As the father of the child, the decision to terminate should not have been made without my clear and explicit knowledge that she was pregnant. We weren't separated at the time, nor did I cheat, and contrary to popular belief, I'm not abusive. I deserve to know. I won't apologize for expecting my wife to consult me on family planning decisions. I do the same for her 10 times over if roles were reversed. Call it controlling if you want, I really don't care. Asking if I want kids is a completely different discussion than terminating a pregnancy. Now for the update. I came home the morning after my initial post, and Clara and I had a very long conversation. We both apologized for letting the previous discussion get out of hand and for acting out of character. I also explained why I left in the first place and apologized for raising my voice, as she's especially sensitive to that. She forgave me and said that as long as we could keep things calm this time, it would be okay. She was more interested in finding out what I had been so deep in thought about while I was gone for so long. We do take breaks from conflicts from time to time and revisit them when we're calmer, but this was the first time I physically removed myself from her proximity. I told her how I initially felt after reading her journal entry. I hadn't been mad then, but part of me was confused, as we had agreed on no kids before getting married, and the other half was riddled with anxiety. Contrary to what you may all think, I adore Clara. She is honestly one of the only good things life has given me. I didn't want to lose her, but if she wanted kids badly enough to write about them in her journal, I wasn't sure what that would mean for us. She downplayed the importance of the entry. In her view, not everything she puts into the journal is something she's genuinely hoping for. Some things are just nice to fantasize about, and not every fantasy is meant to be reality. I was honest. I told her that her words were hard to believe, given how meticulously she had written everything down and planned it out. The last thing I wanted was for her to harbor resentment over what her life could have been. She assured me that wasn't the case, but I'm still unsure. Talking about the termination itself was hard on both of us. I wanted to know if she was in pain and what signs I had missed. I didn't really press for details about the procedure, but we talked a lot about how she felt afterward, why she hid it, and how she made her decision. I just held her in my arms and listened for the most part. It was gut-wrenching, to say the least. It turns out that the second time she asked if I wanted kids occurred a month or two after she had already had the procedure done. She asked because she was contemplating whether or not to tell me about it. I guess she ultimately decided not to. She told me I was actually with her the day she took the pills. I remembered the day because she had been crying, and I wasn't sure why. When I asked, she mentioned cramps, so I got her a heating pad and lay down with her. Her periods have always been pretty hard on her, so I guess I didn't think much of it. In hindsight, I should have realized something was up because she hadn't had bad cramps in years. Still, I'm glad she didn't go through it completely alone. Much later that day, I asked her why she didn't come to me when she realized she was pregnant. In her eyes, she was protecting our relationship. She knows our circumstances, my reasons for not wanting kids, and my stance on termination. She didn't want to burden me with having to choose between the two, so she made the choice herself. As hard as I try, I can't understand or accept her reasoning. Her decision to go through this alone, while meant to shield me, inadvertently communicated that she doesn't trust me to support her or handle the truth. All I understood is that she feels like she can't lean on me when she's in trouble, and if that's the case, I'm not sure why we're married. She's always been independent, but this is the first time I've felt completely blindsided by not being included. I asked repeatedly if I had given her a reason to doubt me, doubt my commitment to her, or feel that I wasn't a reliable partner. She said no, but that just makes all this harder to grasp. She said she was afraid that saying anything would change how I viewed her or our relationship, but I'm having a hard time distinguishing insecurity and anxiety from reasonable doubt. I asked her if she knew I loved her, how much I care for her, and the lengths I would go to make her happy. She laughed a little and reminded me of a line from my wedding vows. We shared private vows before our ceremony, and I had said quite a bit. I was a little shocked that she remembered that portion at all, let alone word for word. We transitioned to talking about the promises we made to each other in times in our relationship when we had complete trust and faith in one another. It helped put us both in better moods and ended the night on a lighter note. We're doing okay at the moment. Not quite where we were before, but getting there. Everything is still incredibly raw, especially our eyes since we both broke down 5 minutes into the conversation. Clara is against couples counseling right now, though I'm ambivalent, as we're still working a couple of things out on our own. I'm not sure how helpful a third party asking what steps we're willing to take to improve trust and transparency will really be, but I'm open to anything at this point. We're not leaving each other, issues or not, we both think it's clear that there's still an abundance of love between us, and we don't want to throw that away. Some of you will be happy to know that Clara and I decided on a new rule for ourselves. Clara was a lot more upset about my leaving than she initially let on. From now on, the distance between the top and bottom floors of our home is all the space either of us is allowed to take if we need to cool our heads. If proximity really does become an issue, the max either of us is allowed to stay outside the house is 48 hours. So no more week-long stays at my sister's. And that's about it.